Welcome back. Today we're going to take this toggle switch and we're going to create a dark mode and light mode. So transition between the light and the dark mode, but more importantly, when you close your browser and reload it back up, it's going to remember the state that you were actually previously in. So in this case, it was dark mode, and no matter how many times I reload, it acknowledges the fact that you were in dark mode and it will reset your dark mode. So if I change it to light mode, reload, it'll always remember. Now, in my last video, I created this really simple toggle. I'm going to link to that down in the description, but I'm going to use this as a basis. There's no point in me creating two buttons which say light mode and dark mode if I've got this ready to hand to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start by creating some script, and I'm going to console.log something to the screen. So let's just say, let's say hello with some nice exclamation marks, just to make sure that I can write some script down here. So I get hello. Let's zoom in a little bit with 3 exclamation marks, so we know that that's working. Now, in order for me to create it like a dark mode and a light mode, I need to know whether this status of this checkbox is checked or unchecked. So it's basically a boolean: light, dark, checked, unchecked, true, false. Okay, so what I can do is I can store the contents of this element, or I can store this element, should I say, in a variable. So I can say slider is equal to document dot query selector, and I'm going to select the dot switch class. So I'm targeting this class up here. Save that, and what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to console.log slider.checked. I want to see if this element has been checked, and it's not. So that's right, because it's not. When you load the page up for the first time, it's not checked, and so we're obviously going to have a false all the time. So what I want to do is I'm going to cut this out. Actually, I'm going to say slider dot add an event listener. I want to watch for some, an event that happens to this element. In this case, I want to watch for a change. So whenever there's any change, let's do something. So I'm just going to create a function here, and I'm just going to console.log checked or unchecked. So right now, if I click this, true, false, true, false, true, false, false, and as you can see, this will just keep on going indefinitely. What I'm going to do, instead of a console log here, I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to say change dark mode, and just call a function here. Whenever there's a change to this state, to the checkbox, I want you to call a function called change dark mode. So let's just create that now. Change dark mode, and then I'm just going to console.log the state. So nothing's different here. It's exactly what we just had a second ago. However, that's not right. So what have I done different? Function dark mode. True, false, false. Okay, so we're now calling this function, and as I say, nothing's changed from what we just had a second ago. Now, because I've got this, what I can do is I can actually change this into an if statement. So if slider is checked, I want you to do something, else I want you to do something else. Well, at this point, we could probably use a toggle and say, well, actually, just toggle the mode on and off. But I want to add this into local storage in a bit. So what I would say is, let's just add in a document.body.classList, and I want to add a class. But what do you want to add? I want to add dark to the body. Now, then, if it's not ticked, I want to remove that class. So now what we can do is just reload the page, make sure that's reloaded, and click on elements. And what I'm looking for is the body here. The body, whenever we click on this, we're getting a class being added, dark or removed. So now we've got a dark mode and our light mode. So I'm going to come over to my styles. Actually, before I do that, let's just, because if I change this light mode to dark mode, it's not a dramatic enough effect. I want to add like an element around this. So I'm going to add a div of container, and let's just move all of these here. Save that. Got a container, and then let's just come up into our style.css and target those. So I'm going to say container is width, say 50%. Height, give this a default height of, let's say, 200 pixels. and I'm going to give it a background of, actually I've got a background color here. Let's just pull that up. So I've got a default background of hashtag F1. Oh, F1, F1, F1. Okay. Now, obviously, by saving this, it's removed the display flex on this parent. So I'm just going to copy those elements. Before I do that, I'm going to just add a border radius, say 10 pixels, just to give it like a rounded effect. Great. And then I want to align all of these elements, so the checkbox, into the middle of the screen. So let's just copy what we've got up there. There's no point in me rewriting it out. So display flex, align items, justify content, and we've now got everything in the center of our box. Brilliant. Now we know that we've got a dark mode being added to the body, and if that's the case, then we can just add a body.dark mode. And what do we want to change? Well, I want to change whenever you've got a body class of dark, I want the background to be hashtag, let's say 5b 5b 5b. Save that, and I'm just going to click on that. We get that effect, you know, but it's quite abrupt and quite dramatic, you know, all of a sudden. It's hard on the eyes. So we'll add a transition to this in a second. Before we do that, let's just make sure that we've got a dark container as well. So I'm going to say container, dark first, container. And what is it that you want? Well, we want the background of this to change. So background, and say hashtag wait. That. I click on this, get both elements slightly darker. Fantastic. Okay, I suppose one of the final pieces here then is we want to just make a transition to these elements. Whenever something changes, we want a transition. So I'm going to say transition, say all the elements, 0.3 seconds. Let's go with 0.3 seconds. 0.3 seconds, and change this to linear. So if I click on this, we get that nice easing effect of becoming a dark mode. Now obviously we can probably play nice with the colors a little bit more and actually have, you know, colors that work together, but the concept here works. Now the problem that we've got with this is, obviously, if I just reload this page, everything's always going to go back to the default state. How can we get it to remember you've selected a dark mode in your settings? Well, we do that through local storage. So I've actually created a video, and I'm going to again link to that down in the description, and it's basically how to get started with local storage. Essentially, with local storage, what you can do is you can save pieces of information in a key value pair. So in our case right now, what we could say is dark mode true or false, and then every time that we load that browser up, we can pull from local storage. If that exists, then set the mode. So what I'm going to do quickly is I'm just going to set a piece of state in the local storage. So to set something, what you say is local storage with a capital S, and I want to set an item with a capital I, and then you give it a key value pair. So I'm going to say dark mode, and I'm going to say dark mode is true. Let's just save that. So now if I reload the browser, we've obviously just set the dark mode. Like there's nothing, you know, there's no I've got to click a button to set it. It just sets it straight away. If I inspect, click on the little arrow and go to application, what you should see here is local storage down the left hand side. If I click on that, I've got dark mode set to true. If I change this to say false, dark mode has now been set to false. So every time I reload this though, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete that. Every time I reload this browser, so I'm reloading right now, you can see the little reload. This state stays. You know, so what I can do now is I can pull from this, and I can say, well, actually, fetch the dark mode, and if it exists, set the value to what this is, whether it's a true or a false. So to get started with that, all we need to do is we need to actually first of all check if that state actually exists. And I'm going to do that by a simple if statement. I'm going to say if local storage dot get item, and I want to use the dark mode exists, or actually let's just say if it is equal to true, then we want to do something. So I'm going to say slider dark.checked is equal to true, because the dark mode has been set in local storage, and so we need to set the slider to say that you're true. The reason we're doing this is because if we toggle it and we turn it off, well, it's actually been turned off and it's false, and it's going to set it becomes backwards. It basically, you're setting the state to be true, but it's not true. So we are saying dark mode is true, and when you click on this, there is a change, and it's going to go back the other way around, and it will remove the class because class exists. Sorry, slider is checked. So here, what I'm going to do is then say document.body, .body.class list, and then I want to add dark this. So if dark mode is true, set the slider to be true, and also set dark on the actual body. So select, go to our application, change this state, let's say true, reload, and that's interesting. I thought that would have actually, did I do double equals? I done double equals. Okay, that's why. So reload. Okay, so because this is true, that was my mistake. I done a double equals here. Now whenever we reload, it's setting the check status to true. Okay, so we now obviously need to make sure that we handle the change in value. So right now we're cancelling the slider, and it's always going to be true because it's pulling from dark mode here, and it's always going to be overriding this down here. So what we need to do is we need to set the local storage based on what the user has selected up here. So as you can imagine, it's just doing what we done earlier. So I'm going to say local storage dot set item, and we're setting dark mode, and we're going to say, well, set that to true. I'm going to duplicate that, move down a couple of lines, and I'm going to say, well, if we're removing dark, then we're going to set the local storage to false as well. So right now, if I reload, it's currently set to true. If I tick it, false, untick it. Now what should happen, no matter what state I leave this browser in, if I close this off, it's not set, always going to be not set. If I turn it on and reload, no matter how many times I reload, it's always going to remember that state. So I hope that makes sense. I hope that clears things up, and you can now take this away and use this in your projects. If you do have any questions, please feel free to comment down below. Until next time, take it easy.